Do you know that God cares about even the smallest details of our lives? This story is found in 2 Kings 6 verses 1 to 7, and it's about the miracle of the floating AxeHead. Though it may seem like a minor event in the grand scheme of things, it holds some important lessons for us as Christians. Let's take a closer look. In 2 Kings 6, we find the prophet Elisha and a group of prophets. These men had been living in a communal setting, working and studying under Elisha's guidance. One day, they were at the Jordan River cutting down trees to build a new dwelling place. As one of the men was chopping, the AxeHead, which was made of iron, suddenly flew off the handle and sank into the water. The man cried out, "Alas, master, it was borrowed." His distress was evident, not because the AxeHead was lost, but because it wasn't his, it was borrowed. This put him in a difficult position, as he would now be responsible for replacing it. At this point, we see something extraordinary happen. Elisha doesn't rebuke the man or simply tell him not to worry. Instead, Elisha asks him to show where the AxeHead sank. Once they point out the spot, Elisha cuts a piece of wood, throws it into the water, and miraculously, the iron AxeHead floats to the surface. The man retrieves it and his problem is solved. Let's break this down to understand the deeper spiritual lessons we can draw from this passage. 1. God cares about the small things. One of the first things we learn from this story is that God cares about both the big and small things in our lives. The loss of an AxeHead might seem like a trivial problem in the grand scheme of things. After all, the Israelites were facing many larger challenges at this time, including the oppression of surrounding nations. Yet, God chose to intervene in this seemingly small issue. This teaches us that no problem is too small for God to care about. Often, we may feel hesitant to bring our worries before God because they seem too insignificant. But this passage reminds us that God is concerned with every detail of our lives. Whether it's a relationship issue, a financial struggle, or even a minor inconvenience, God cares and is willing to help. The disciples were not left to figure out the problem on their own. Elisha, representing God's guidance, took immediate action, showing that God sees and understands our struggles, no matter how trivial they might seem. This is further emphasized in 1 Peter 5 verse 7, where we are told, "Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you." God invites us to bring all of our burdens to him, not just the big ones, but even the little ones. When we face difficulties, we are not alone. God is with us, and he is concerned about everything that affects our lives. 2. Faith in action. The next important lesson we can draw from this story is the relationship between faith and action. Elisha didn't simply offer a prayer or give a lecture on faith. He did something. When the man pointed out where the AxeHead had fallen, Elisha acted. He cut a piece of wood, threw it into the water, and the AxeHead miraculously floated. There's an important truth here for us as believers. Faith is not just about believing God can do something. It's about acting on that belief. Elisha didn't sit idly by, waiting for the problem to fix itself. He responded to God's prompting and took action, even in a situation that might have seemed unlikely for a miracle. In James 2 verse 26, we are reminded, "Faith without works is dead." Elisha's actions demonstrated his trust in God's ability to provide. When we face challenges, we must also respond in faith by taking the necessary steps that align with God's will. Whether it's praying for guidance, taking practical steps toward a solution, or even waiting patiently for God's timing, our actions reflect our trust in God's ability to help us. This doesn't mean we can force a miracle to happen or make things go our way. But it does mean that faith involves stepping out in obedience to God's leading, just as Elisha did. It's a reminder that our faith is alive when we put it into practice. 3. God's power over the natural world. Another profound lesson in this passage is God's power over the natural world. The miracle of the floating AxeHead is an extraordinary event that defies the natural laws of physics. For an iron object to float, it would require divine intervention, and that's exactly what happened. The fact that God had control over nature and could make the AxeHead float is a powerful reminder that he is the creator of the universe, and nothing is too difficult for him. This story serves as a reminder that no matter how impossible a situation seems, God has the power to intervene in the natural world. The laws of nature are not a limitation for God. He is the one who created everything, and He is able to do things that go beyond what we can understand or explain. When we face what seems like an insurmountable obstacle, we can trust that God has the power to work miracles. In Jeremiah 32 verse 17, we read, "Ah, sovereign Lord, you have made the heavens and the earth by your great power and outstretched arm. Nothing is too hard for you." This is the God we serve, the God who has control over all of creation, the God who can make an iron axe head float and can bring about solutions in our lives that we could never imagine. 4. God's grace and provision. While the miracle of the floating axe head was certainly an act of divine power, it also speaks of God's grace and provision. The young man who lost the axe head didn't deserve the miracle. He hadn't earned it, and in fact, he was in a difficult situation because of his own mistake. Yet, God, in His mercy, provided a solution. This is a powerful illustration of God's grace. Just as the disciple didn't deserve the miracle, we, too, don't deserve God's grace and provision. But God, in His loving kindness, gives us what we need, not because we've earned it, but because He is gracious and generous. In Ephesians 2 verses 8 to 9, we are reminded, "For it is by grace you have been saved, through faith, and this is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast." God's grace is not limited to our salvation. It extends to every aspect of our lives. He provides for us not because of our goodness, but because of His love and grace. We can trust in God's provision, knowing that He will meet our needs, even when we don't deserve it. 5. Obedience to God's leading. The final lesson we can learn from this story is the importance of obedience to God's instructions. Elisha didn't just act on his own ideas. He acted according to God's leading. It wasn't the piece of wood itself that caused the axe head to float. It was the obedience to God's instruction that brought about the miracle. This reminds us that God may call us to do things that don't make sense in the natural world. The piece of wood in this story was simply a tool used to demonstrate faith and obedience. When God leads us, even if it seems unconventional, we must follow in obedience. In Isaiah 55 verses 8 to 9, God reminds us, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways and my thoughts than your thoughts." God's ways are often beyond our understanding, but we can trust that His instructions will lead us to what is best for us. So, what does all of this mean for us today? The story of the floating axe head shows us that God cares about every part of our lives. He's concerned with both our big problems and our small ones. He calls us to act in faith, trusting that He has the power to do the impossible. We can rely on His grace and provision, knowing that He will meet our needs, and we must be obedient to His leading, even when it doesn't make sense. God is with you, and He will provide what you need no matter what you're going through. No matter how small or large the problem may seem, remember that God is not distant. He is right there, ready to help. So, trust Him, act in faith, and know that with God, all things are possible.